And normally, if we're operating in a situation or an environment where our purchasing power is diminishing, it poses some challenges. And it's to say that if your purchasing power is on the decline and you don't do something about it, you stand the risk of living a lower standard of living. You stand the risk of falling below your economic level. As a matter of fact, you are most likely to fall into poverty if you don't handle it. And so, the very essence of this meeting is to have a chat and have a discussion on how we can navigate a situation, a scenario where the purchasing power in your hands is declining from time to time. And essentially, the first thing I think we need to look at is, because whatever you do, you start from the known to the unknown. When your purchasing power is on the decline, the first thing you look at is, of course, the money in your hands. How do I apportion it to meet my needs? And so the first port of call is your expenses. And when it comes to your expenses, the first thing we look at is how to make sure that your expenses are within budget. So at times like this, it is critical, it is important that we as men must have our budgets. You can have a budget on a monthly basis, you can have a budget on a 2-weekly basis, or even a weekly basis. But there has to be a budget to be able to guide your expenses, to prevent you from impulse purchases. Also to be able to track your expenses, to make sure that you maintain a fairly comfortable living standard. So by the time you look at the issue of budgeting, then you now begin to find out where and where you may have need to cut down on spending. So you may need to cut down on wants and the not too essential expenditures. You can agree with me that there are a couple of things we spend money on which actually are not needs. So in a situation whereby our purchasing power is on the decline, of course it behoves us to prioritize. What are the critical things we need? What are the things we can do away with? And so it's important to take that decision and then focus our scarce resources on spendings that are critical, on spendings that are very, very needful. And then the ones we can do away with, we'll do away with them. Some of the things we can do away with or cut down, if not do away completely, we can cut down on eating out. Unfortunately, this also will impact other people, other industries. But we're looking at you now as an entity. We're looking at the family as an entity. And the question is, what am I going to cut out to be able to still live a fairly comfortable life standard? You may need to cut out essentially cut out dining out, visiting to gardens in evenings. You may need to avoid impulsive buying. You may also begin to think of buying things in bulk and possibly being able to buy from the source in order to cut out middlemen, to be able to cope. Further to that, you can now see how you can pool resources together, like pooling a vehicle. So instead of you bearing the cost alone, you can team up with some people to bear certain cost. If you live in the same area, we could say, okay, today we drive in my car, another day we drive in another person's car, just to cut cost. Then there might be need for you to also see how you can augment or reduce spending. But if you have gardens, if you have space around you, you could be involved in small scale agriculture, planting things, so that basic food stuff, you can have some of them grown within you and around you without spending money to buy those things. Even the issue of your generators, because of the very high cost of diesel and the high cost of petrol, there's nothing wrong in even reducing the number of hours that you run your generators. There are some of us who have a membership of gym. You can call down on membership of gym, and then you can walk around in your estate. You can jog within your estate. And even depending on your circumstances, we know that most schools in Abuja are quite expensive. But there are also schools that are not very, very expensive like that, and yet they have good standards. There's a possibility of also perhaps getting your children into schools that are not too expensive, just to be able to cope with the declining purchasing power. I want to stop on this in the area of expenses, because I believe that these are the things we know. But before I talk about the income, which is actually where we're going to spend most of our time today, on looking at how we can cope with present economic realities, suffice to say that we need to look at our expenses and cut down, frankly, on things